Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing another build request. Now this was one that just kind of popped up in my comment section just kind of as I was going through some YouTube related stuff. And it immediately caught my eye because it was a combination I myself had never ever thought of before. Somebody proclaimed to me that their favourite classes were Bard and Druid, and they were looking for a way to mix them together. And that immediately got me thinking, like, actually, that could be a really interesting idea thematically, but how to make it work mechanically, because obviously the immediate problems come up. First off, charisma-based caster and wisdom-based caster. Very, very hard to make those two things mix. Second of all, a druid's main identifying feature is wild shape. As well, yes, it is a full spellcaster. You know, you want to be wild shaping, really, don't you, for the most part? So is there a way to make a druid build interesting and fun that doesn't rely on wild shape so you can use those bardic features more? And second of all, what subclasses, and third of all even, what subclasses to pick? What would create an interesting synergy that would be effective in combat that isn't just, you know, Swords Bard, Spores Druid? Because let's be honest, Swords Bard, Spores Druid would be the most powerful way to build this combination. You would get a ton of powerful melee attacks, fighting style, maybe even the ability to dual wield, and then just absolutely go to town with the extra necrotic damage and, you know, the big spells you get from that. That would be the best way to do it, obviously. But I wanted to try doing something a little bit different, something that felt a bit more mystical, and something that felt a bit more spellcastery. You'll see what I mean as we get into it. But I really wanted to try doing something a little bit different with this, and I actually do have another idea for a bard build that spawned from this that I really want to do. So that will kind of be more orientated in the more kind of melee fighter kind of way. But let's get into the build for this one. So, like I say, this is a Bard-Druid mix, so we're going to be starting off with Bard, mainly because we take less levels in Bard than we do in Druid, so we might as well get those really useful Bard features early on. Namely, we're going to be grabbing, weapon and armor proficiencies. We're also going to be able to grab a couple of cantrips, and we're taking the standard Bishop's Mockery and Friends combo. These are the standard Bard cantrips you pretty much always want to pick up. As for our spells, I've gone mainly for utility options here, but there are obviously a lot of things you can pick, but I'm going with Longstrider, Featherfall, Fairy Fire, and Speak with Animals. Mainly Speak with Animals just because I don't want to kind of hold off that druidic vibe for that long, so getting Speak with Animals like basically right off from level 1 will still let you feel like you're kind of more of a druid, even if you're not actually a druid yet. So I wanted to go with that here, and we can get other spells that we want from the druid spell list, because our druid spell list is going to be pretty tightly packed, so getting as many good utility options from Bard as possible would be great. As well as Fairy Fire. This is kind of a you can kind of put whatever you like in this slot, but mainly I just kind of wanted to, throw something in here that would be good for, like, a support kind of focused thing, because I do want to kind of get, like, support stuff from the Bard and then more offensive stuff from the Druid. So Fairy Fire does work here, although our DC is going to be a bit lower, so you can kind of pick whatever you like here, maybe Disguise Self, or maybe some of the healing spells if you would like. It's entirely up to you. You're going to have to play around with this slot, and then obviously, like I said, we have Longstrider and Featherfall. As for our starting instrument, I really like the lyre for this character. I can see this character basically being a, as I've titled the video, a voice of the wilds. Somewhat of a, rather vocal druid that, took up an instrument and as such has allowed themselves to be able to channel the will of nature and the elements through their voice, and as such can cast powerful magics in a bit more of a bardic fashion, rather than, specifically like a druidic fashion, which I think is actually really, really neat, flavor-wise. Maybe kind of like you get like a druid, like, it's a shame we can't do it in this game, but imagine a druid that casts their spells through, like, singing, like maybe like a opera style or something, or like a hymn. That would be really, really cool. But I can also see this character kind of perched up on a rock, playing their lyre for all of the kind of like woodland creatures and spirits that are around them, and creating an almost like Studio Ghibli-esque scene. So that's kind of why I went with that kind of instrument, and that's kind of my lore idea for this character. As for the abilities, we've got an interesting spread here. Charisma is at 12. Yes, we are a bard, but we don't actually need it to be that high if we're mainly going for utility options, so Charisma sitting at a 12, which is going to be good for the skill checks at least, is pretty good. We've also gone with Wisdom at 16. Again, it is going to be our main spellcasting stat because we're taking more levels in Druid, so I wanted this as high as we could get it. Intelligence and 10 just to round out our ability scores and allow us to be a bit more proficient in those checks, and Constitution and Dexterity are both at 14, so we have that nice middle ground. As per our proficiencies, I've decided to use our bardic proficiencies, which is another reason why we went for Bard level 1, to grab nature and animal handling as well as performance, and then from our race, since we're a wood elf, we get perception and stealth, and from our background, which is the outlander, we get athletics and survival, really rounding out that kind of druidic skill set without actually being a druid yet, but we'll get to that. Next up, at level 2, we're going to be able to get our main bardic features, that being Jack of all trades, meaning that we add half our proficiency bonus rounded down to ability checks that we're not proficient in. Since we have such a, like a well-rounded set of stats, this is going to come up a lot more often. As well as Song of Rest, giving us a third short rest. Always really, really good, especially if we're going to be playing a slightly more support-orientated bard underneath our more offensive druid. This is just a nice support option to have. We do get an extra spell at this level, and it really is a pick-your-favourite situation. There's not too much here I can really suggest. An off-kill to healing spell could be clutch in a few situations, or something like Heroism might also be good, although that requires your concentration. Dissonant Whispers would be good, but again, our Charisma's not that high, so kind of play around with this slot. I mean, obviously Animal Friendship would be the most on-theme choice, but again, we could get that from Druid if we desperately wanted it. Bane could also work, but I think I am just going to go with something like Healing Word for a quick bonus action heal. And finally, at Bard level 3, we get to pick our subclass. Now, it's entirely up to you what you want to go with here. I mean, you could go for College of Law, College of Valor, or College of Swords, but I feel like College of Valor and College of Swords are a little bit less valuable since we're not actually going to be reaching level 6 in Bard, so we're not getting that extra attack, and we're also not really a melee-focused fighter, so I don't find these to be as valuable. College of Law, however, is a very, very nice subclass that feels that fits really, really well into using that whole use your voice aspect. So let's look at that. First of all, we're going to get 2 skills. So because we're a law bard, we're going to get 3 skills and 2 expertise, and it's entirely up to you what you want to go with here. We do get stealth proficiency from our race, and we could get greater invisibility later as part of the druid spell list if you wanted to, because Circle of the, I guess spoilers, Circle of the Land can get it. We're finally using that subclass, so if you wanted to go with stealth expertise here, you absolutely can. But I'm not going to be doing that here. I just kind of want to grab some general druidic proficiencies like medicine, religion, and what would be a good final one? I actually quite like persuasion. Again, if we're kind of a master of using our voice, that makes sense. And I think nature expertise also makes sense here, as well as something probably like survival or perception, but you can kind of play this as like a gamey type thing, do whatever you like. So persuasion would probably be the best in-game answer, but really do whatever you like here. As for our spells, we do get access to level 2 spells at this point, and from the Bard spell list we can take whatever we like. But again, there's nothing really crazy here that I want, so I'm just going to go with Enhance Ability, because it's always going to be useful in this game. And with our 3rd level of Bard out of the way, we're going to Druid. Now, the cool thing about this build is depending on how much you want to get out of each class, you can fluctuate the levels here. If you feel like you don't care so much about maybe like the level 9 spells that we could get from Druid, you could bump Druid down to 8 and go to 4 in Bard. You could do a bunch of other things here, but my plan is to go to Druid 9 because I want to, so I'm going to be swapping over to Druid now, but feel free to play around with these levels. As I said, we're going Druid, which is going to allow us to get 2 more cantrips, and I'm going to be recommending Produce Flame and Guidance, mainly because we're going to be able to get that elemental casting, and Guidance is going to give us a buff to our skill checks. As for our spells, we have a few options here. Like we got a lot of our utility options from our first level, from our Bard levels, so let's start getting into those more offensive options now. Let's grab Ice Knife, Thunder Wave, well, I mean, it's another utility option, but we'll grab Enhanced Leap so we can round it out. And we can grab Animal Friendship here too, because I really like the idea of this of this character kind of interacting with animals quite a lot. So even though mechanically it's probably a bit meh, thematically, I just like having animal friendship. Now, with Druid level 2, we are picking our subclass, and yes, I am finally doing it. I am choosing Circle of the Land. If you watched my video from Tuesday, which was my kind of joke tier list video, which admittedly I understand did not go down well with a lot of people, but hey ho, you know, I kind of, at the very end of the video, I bashed Circle of the Land a little bit. If you haven't seen that video, the whole thing was like I put every single class in S tier, and Circle of the Land was S tier too, because at the end of the day, we are still playing a full caster with a lot of spell options, but my main issue with Circle of the Land at the time was that I felt like it didn't really have an identity. It didn't really stand out to me as a subclass worth picking, because if you wanted to go all the way Circle of the Land, and you wanted to be a spell caster, well then you're kind of losing out on things like Wild Shape, and, you know, like other better things you can get from other subclasses, and while Natural Recovery is a cool feature, it's literally just a watered-down version of the feature that all wizards get, that being Arcane Recovery. And the kind of level 6 and 10 features aren't great. You get immunity to difficult terrain, and the ability to not be like poisoned or diseased or charmed by Fae, like at level 10, which is just bad. So I really was struggling to come up with a justification as to why I would ever use Circle of the Land in a build. And it wasn't until I was going over the spell list and the stuff that I kind of wanted to do with this build that I realised what Circle of the Land actually has, that while the other classes do have, this one can kind of do in an interesting way, and that is be an elemental caster. I'm talking fire, ice, lightning, poison, necrotic, earth, like if any sort of kind of like special, if you wanted to make like an elemental build that doesn't just focus on one element, like Draconic Soul, or kind of has a slightly more limited pool of spells to kind of choose from, like some other classes, maybe even like Cleric or something. Obviously, Wizard still has a ton of options, but is a bit more squishy than the Druid. You can kind of going with Circle the Land Druid actually works quite well, and it carves out its own little niche if you want to be a bit more of a frontline blaster caster than perhaps a wizard would normally be. Yes, I feel like if you want to build the most powerful blaster caster, then Evocation Wizard is obviously the best, but hell, you could throw 2 levels of wizard onto this build and get that evocation buff to all of your druid spells as well. So you kind of have to... Circle of the Land, in my opinion, still has a bit of a tough time fitting in amongst the rest of the subclasses in this game, but I feel like with this build I have kind of found a fun little niche that it might have. So, and again, because it's one of the only subclasses that I've not really used, I wanted to try using it here. So, with level 2 of Druid, we're going to be going with Circle of the Land, we're going to be getting our usual wild shape stuff, and we're also going to be getting Natural Recovery, allowing us to replenish expanded spell slots equal to half of our Druid level. By the time we reach the end of this build, and it's rounded up, so by the time we're at the end of this build, you'll be able to recover spell slots up to level 5, which is pretty damn good. As for cantrips, we do get to pick another one, and I'm going to go with Poison Spray, just because it's kind of another elemental cantrip. And for our prepared spells, we do get to pick another one here, and if we're going to get lightning stuff later, which we are, let's get Create or Destroy Water to make it better. And by make it better, I mean make enemies vulnerable to lightning and cold damage, both of which we're going to be doing, so, you know. As for now, here's the unique feature of the Circle of the Land Druid. You get to choose a domain to pull extra spells from that are always prepared. Now, the thing is, with this build, it's honestly entirely up to you what you choose to take. Although you should note that Druid does get some spells through this feature that it can't otherwise normally get. Most of these spells are already on the Druid spell list, but there are a few exceptions. For example, Underdark gets Web, which I don't believe Druid normally gets. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. I was pretty sure of that, because I've tried to build around this before. So you can absolutely go with Underdark if you wanted to pick up Web. I am personally going to be going with Coast to get us 2 really awesome utility options in Mirror Image and Misty Step. Misty Step is going to allow us to use our bonus action to move around the map with ease, as it's when playing a full caster. We're going to be able to use this a lot. And Mirror Image is a non-concentration free buff to our armor class that is really, really powerful, especially when we're going to have slightly lower armor class with this build because our dex is not going to be as high. As for our spells, we do get to prepare a couple more at this level, and I want to grab some elemental spells, namely Flame Blade. My kind of melee option for this build is to actually have a scimitar in our main hand, and then use Flame Blade in the offhand as a bonus action attack, because with this build, a lot of our spells take up our main action, with the exception of like Misty Step. So having an offhand high damage option, you can just cast Flame Blade with as high a spell slot as you're willing to use at the start of combat, and then go from there. So Flame Blade is actually a really, really good option on this build as a kind of like sidearm. And as for our other spells, you can take whatever you like here. Heat Metal would be a powerful concentration option, although this build is going to be a little bit concentration heavy, so be prepared for that. In fact, most of the spells I can see here are concentration related in some way. Spike Growth could be nice. Moonbeam would be a fun option. In fact, I'm going to go with Moonbeam, because I can't remember if I've ever actually taken it in a build. Not quite like Moonbeam here. Next up at Druid level 4, we are going to be picking up our first feat, and yes, this is quite late. Again, you can play around with these levels if you like, but I'm mainly just kind of wanting to show off this combo. And we're going to be taking an ability score improvement and bumping up our wisdom. We want this as high as it can go. And we do get another cantrip at this level, and I'm going to grab Thorn Whip just to get that extra little bit of druidic magic. Next up at Druid level 5, we're going to be able to grab level 3 spells, including a couple of extra ones from our Circle of the Land. We get a few options here, but I want to go with Arctic, because it's going to grab us Sleet Storm, another nice kind of elemental spell, but it is also going to grant us Haste, which is going to be super awesome for a build like this. A Blaster caster with Haste up is a force to be reckoned with, although again, we are going to suffer from the problem of that a lot of our elemental spells are going to be concentration based, so Haste might not be up as much as you would like, or you're going to find your spell selection kind of restricted while Haste is up. So if you feel like you don't want to go for that, I mean, there is a ton of other cool options. Coast would get you Sleet Storm and Cool Lightning. Not that one. Maybe that one. There's another option that will give you Haste, but it only gives you Daylight as your other option, so you could go for Mountain for Lightning Bolt, which you wouldn't normally be able to get. If you wanted to go for Lightning Bolt and Grant Flight, those are two very cool options with Mountain there. Swamp would give you Vampiric Touch and the Stinking Cloud, maybe not. And Gaseous Form and Stinking Cloud from Underdark. I'm going to go with Arctic, but there are a lot of cool options here. That Mountain option looks like it could be a future build. And we do get level 3 spells from this build, from this point on anyway, and of course we're going with Cool Lightning, mixing this with Create or Destroy Water. We're going to have a fun time. I also do want to pick up Plant Growth, because it is going to synergize with a piece of equipment we're going to be getting later. And finally, our last spell can be whatever we like. It's not a huge deal. Let's grab something from level 2. Let's grab Heat Metal. Why not? But again, play around with this, because we're very concentration dependent. Next up at Druid, level 6, we're going to be getting our subclass feature, like I said, and it is the fact that we just get Land Stride, meaning that difficult terrain no longer slows you down. This doesn't prevent you from, like, tripping on ice and stuff like that. So, again, for a level 6 feature, it's not great. I mean, it's kind of meh. But we are going to be able to get some more prepared spells at this level, and again, take whatever you like. I mean, Flaming Sphere could be a good option if you want to do a little bit of summoning, but there is a ton of options here. You can pick whatever you like. I'm not your mum. Do what you want. None of my business. Now, we are going to get access to levels 4 spells at this point, including some from our Circle of the Land, and we have a few options here. Underdark would give you greater invisibility if you wanted to go for that Stealth Expertise, greater invisibility route, as well as Dominate Beast, which would work nicely with kind of our animal theme that we got going. But I think I'm personally going to be grabbing... Where is it? What did I pick before? I believe I picked Arctic, because we would get Ice Storm and Conjure Minor Elemental. Conjure Minor Elemental is again a pretty cool summoning spell that we're going to be able to use to give our team a bit more oomph, and Ice Storm is going to be a really powerful elemental spell that isn't going to take our concentration, so it's definitely something we want around, but there are a few more options here. For example, if you went with Desert, you could get Wall of Fire and Blight, which are both things that we would like. Forest would get you 2 summoning spells. Grassland would give you freedom of movement. Mountain would give you stone skin. There's a whole bunch of options here that you can go with that are really, really cool. I feel like speccing into the stealth route and Underdark would be worth it, but I'm going to be going with Arctic for now. And I'm also going to be able to pick up some more spells at this level, and I definitely would like to grab Wall of Fire, Blight. I'll probably drop Heat Metal for Dominate Beast, and then if you wanted to go more of a summoner route, you could grab some more. But I really kind of like this rounded up, this like kind of wide array of damaging kind of options that we have, because now we have things like Ice Storm, Thunder Wave, Cool Lightning, Blight, Moonbeam, Wall of Fire, Flame Blade. We have a ton of elemental damage options all across the board, which I think is awesome. At Druid level 8, we are going to be getting our second feat, and I just want to take that ability score improvement to cap out our Wisdom. We also are going to get to prepare an extra spell, and it is a take what you like situation. I mean, you can shuffle these around anyway. Let's just grab Freedom of Movement because it's a good spell. And then finally, we are at Druid level 9, meaning we have access to level 5 spells, including our ones gained from Circle of the Land, and there are a ton of options. I'm going to be going with Arctic, which is going to grant us Cone of Cold, which we would not normally be able to get, and Contagion, which is just a powerful control spell anyway. But you could also get things like Conjure Elemental, Wall of Stone and Insect Plague, Mass Cure Wounds and Contagion. There's a ton of cool options. Wall of Stone and Conjure Elemental. Cloud Kill and Insect Plague. That's actually a cool one. Oh, a Swamp Druid kind of build would be fun. I think that could actually be interesting. But let's go with Arctic for now. See, now that I'm actually using the subclass, I'm starting to see the point. Right, and for our extra spells, I got a couple that I want to grab here. I want to go with Conjure Elemental, and the second one can be whatever you like, but if we're sticking with the Elements theme, let's grab Wall of Stone. I said in my last video, the Geomancer, that this was kind of a mess spell, but I kind of like it just for staying on theme, and Conjure Elemental is just, if we're playing an Elemental-based build, then Conjure Elemental is kind of just a spell that we want anyway, because, come on, what's more Elemental-themed than literally summoning an Elemental? And that is the build. With this setup, you're going to have a ton of interesting blaster options. Tons of different elements, from lightning to ice to fire to radiant to necrotic. You've got it all here. You've got the ability to summon extra creatures to help you. You do have the ability to wild shape at the end of the day if you still want to. There's definitely merit to doing it. Maybe you have lower spell slots and you need a last resort bit of extra tankiness and a bit more melee prowess, then wild shaping is still an option there. Or, you know, if you just want to play as a cat, which I would like to do. And then, obviously, our bardic stuff is going to give us things like our cutting words from lore, allowing us to support ourselves and our teammates by messing around with enemies' dice rolls. Song of Rest for that extra bit of support there. Vicious Mockery and other things as well. We just have a ton of fun and interesting options here on our little hotbar. But let's get into the equipment. So, really, the equipment here doesn't actually matter that much. It's not really making the build like god tier status compared to what it already was. These are just some fun options that I wanted to go with. First up, our head option here is the Hood of the Weave. We gain a +2 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. This would help a lot with our stuff, especially our bardic stuff. It's an Act 3 option, but it's mainly just here for fashion anyway. You can honestly sub this out for whatever seems useful at the time, so play around with this slot, but I mainly wanted this for fashion and the fact that it does give us a decent buff. Our armor is the Armour of Landfall. You gain a +1 bonus to spell save DC. Nice. When starting your turn on a plant growth surface, so, you know, or a vine surface, so basically something made with plant growth, you regain 1d4 hit points each turn. Nice. But we also gain advantage on Constitution saving throw checks, which is huge. That's going to make up for our slightly lower Constitution. Definitely want to pick this up once you reach Act 3, but up until then, get whatever you like. It's not really going to matter that much. Our gloves are the Wanderer's Gloves, just to give us a buff to our armor class and give us an extra usage of Bardic Inspiration. So even though we have lower Bard levels, we still have 4 Bardic Inspiration charges, meaning we're going to get a decent chunk of use out of those die. And we also just have the Evasive Shoes here for that little bit of extra AC, bringing us up to a total of 17. Not great, but not the worst. I don't know why I've got a glitched Flame Blade in my inventory. I've just noticed that. That's weird. Alright, I just took a quick second there to fix my inventory because the Flame Blade thing was a bit broken. Anyways, I've kind of just realized that we didn't actually get Semi-Sonic Proficiency, which is a whoopsie on my part because we didn't start with Druid. So I've gone with the Knife of the Undermountain King instead, which is a bit more of a basic option, but it will still get the job done. And again, we're mainly just having this in our main hand so that we can have Flameblade in our offhand, which I shall quickly cast just to show off its power. Cast it at the 5th level since I don't have a 6th level spell slot. And it is going to get forced into your main hand, so you will have to swap that around. So you're most likely going to need to cast Flameblade before you enter combat. But if you don't mind it being in the main hand, then don't worry. But Flameblade, at least at this level, it's going to do 4d6 damage. But at 6th level, it would do 5d6 damage, which is pretty powerful. And again, it's just that nice offhand option to have. As for our other weapon, I've gone with the Darkfire Shortbow. Mainly because A, it would give us access to haste a bit earlier, which is nice, and also grabbing that resistance to fire and cold damage, but I also wanted a decent ranged option, and the only kind of one that we really had proficiency for that wasn't dual crossbows, which isn't really something I wanted to use with this build, was short bows, so we might as well get the best of the best. Now, overall, I kind of liked it actually, because I wanted to combine the resistance to fire and cold with resistance to lightning from the Sparks Wall, and also means we can't be electrocuted, which would be nice if we set up those wet surfaces, and the Ring of Poison resistance to grant us resistance to poison damage, so we actually have 4 resistances here, which for an elemental build felt right overall. And we also have, I've kind of just decided to show this one off because it kind of works on theme, but honestly you can put whatever you like in the slot, and that is the Amulet of the Wind Rider. It gives you the ability to cast Ride the Winds, which is basically gaseous form, but you can use it once per long rest, which is kind of nice, and also Gust of Wind, so it kind of just rounds out the elemental options that we have with a bit of air elemental stuff. So yeah, that is the build. Now, as I said before, if you really wanted to build the most powerful kind of Bard Druid combo, you would go with Spores and Swords. Spores and Swords, interesting. But I feel like I wanted to do something just a bit different with this one, kind of go for a different theming, kind of go for a different lore idea, and just use a subclass that I haven't used yet, that being Circle of the Land, whereas I've used Spores and Moon a bunch of times, as well as me using Swordsbard a bunch of times, and I just wanted to do something different, and I'm quite proud of what I've managed to come up with here. You're going to have a ton of interesting spells to cast at any point, meaning that you can take various different strategies in battle, and not feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again, and like I said before, you do still have access to things like Wild Shape, so I feel like the build works out quite nicely overall, and I feel like you will have a ton of fun with it. As for the end of video stuff, not too much to talk about. We are getting close to 3,000 subscribers, which is really nice, and I think once we hit that point, I'm going to do a bit of a channel update, because I'm starting to feel like there's going to need to be some changes around here, and pretty big changes, but I want to kind of go over that 3,000 subscriber kind of milestone before I get too much into that. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. But there is going to be a change, I think, and I think it will be a necessary change that will be good for me and good for everyone else as well. So keep an eye on the channel for the near future for these changes. As for other stuff, I don't think there's much else to go over, so I think I will just leave it here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.
this shit, or Mario will have your head.
You picked the wrong fight, friend. What path lies before me? I'll give it a shot.